All right, moving on to item D, presentation of the Marshal Office Program by Commissioners Weber and Lewis. Do either one of you, would you like to make a comment on this before we start? Commissioner Lewis or Commissioner Weber?
I'll just say I look forward to the presentation. We do have someone from Texas Fair Defense Project that I hope will also provide some community insight to this item. So I hope they've been able to join us.
Can we confirm that before we start, that they've been able to join the line? Do you know who it was?
I believe
There's no one on the line, so we want to make sure.
Carly? No.
Carly Jo Dixon, yes.
Awesome, thank you.
Perfect. So we will go ahead and start with the presentation, and then we will allow everyone that is listed to speak. So ACM Ariano, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And again, good afternoon. Ray Ariano, Assistant City Manager, to provide some opening comments for this topic. As commissioners are aware, the events of last year led to a significant community call to re-examine how we might deliver public safety services, particularly focused on law enforcement. The City Council approved several resolutions in June 2020 that formed the basis for the city's Reimagining Public Safety Initiative. Resolution number 2020-0611-096 directs the city manager in part to explore options for reallocating positions and roles currently assigned to the Austin Police Department that could be managed by other departments. It's in this light that we are here to provide a briefing of a request for council action at its November 18th meeting to consider approval of an ordinance that will allow municipal court to form a marshal office program to provide security for municipal court and downtown Austin Community Court. Marshal program managed by the municipal court would represent a more efficient and smaller investment in fully licensed peace officers with specialized training to operate in a court environment as compared with the breadth of training required of APD law enforcement officers. With that, I'd like to pass the briefing to Municipal Court Clerk Mary Jane Grubb for the remainder of the presentation.
Thank you.
Welcome. Good afternoon. I am Mary Jane Grubb. I'm the court clerk for Austin Municipal Court. So I just want to provide some background in addition to what Ray said. The primary purpose of creating the Marshal's Office is to provide for courthouse security. In 2017, SB 42 was passed. It's known as the Judge Julie Crosurick Act. You're probably very well aware of this. She's a district court judge here in Austin who was shot at her home for the sole reason of her being a judge. And so that legislation was created to highlight the importance of courthouse security and mandates trained personnel reporting and the creation of a court security committee solely based to discuss security-related issues to protect all individuals with business before the court. So, unfortunately, court security incidents are not infrequent. We have them both at Austin Municipal Court and DACC. Some of the most frequent things that we experience are attempted weapons entry. There's been physical injuries, frequent altercations in the lobby and in the courtrooms, and threats made to judges and prosecutors. Statewide trends from 2009 to 2019 indicate a 270% increase in security incidents in the last 10 years and a 426% increase in the last 5 years. And municipal courts do make up 15 to 25% of all of those incidents. In addition to that, recommendations from the State Director of Court Security recommends that while law enforcement resources can be reduced and supplemented with private security, the best security plans include a hybrid of both private security and law enforcement, and it is incumbent for law enforcement to oversee the security actions of the court. We started these discussions maybe about a year and a half ago and have conducted market research not only across the state but nationally and looked at courts of all sizes and all types. And that research indicated that there's many courts that most of them do have law enforcement presence. Some only have private security. And then the best laid plans have a hybrid of both. Again, it's the goal of protecting all stakeholders that come into the court. It's not just criminal defendants. We have defense attorneys, jurors, families of defendants. There's a lot of stakeholders that come into contact in addition to the staff. And Austin Municipal Court is a large volume court. So we have probably 200 to 300 people a day coming into contact. No, can we change the slide? Thank you. As mentioned, the best security plans have a hybrid of resources, but some duties can only be performed by peace officers, and those include process service. Process simply means any means that is used by a court to any means used by a court to exercise jurisdiction over a defendant, and only a peace officer may provide on-site enforcement of penal code and other lawful judicial orders. The intent of this program is for peace officers to have oversight over courthouse security. That is the primary responsibility. In terms of security, they will be placed at the front entrance. The purpose there is to remove any weapons or other contraband and supervision of the private security resources in that front end area. Also to address any escalations that private security cannot handle. In addition, we would also like to place bailiffs in the courtrooms, and the bailiff would be the marshals. We currently do not have bailiffs in our courtrooms. We have one law enforcement officer in our courtroom corridor, and it has not proven to provide a high level of security for the court, and there is a lot of risk there, and that is something that we would like to improve. In addition, I think I might have mentioned this, but the peace officers would have oversight over the private security resources. They would also have responsibility for enforcement of court orders. That is subject to internal policies, so I know there is concern about serving warrants. While peace officers do have the powers of arrest and serving warrants, we have not had that activity for the last couple of years due to resource shortages. We do not intend to reenact that activity for the foreseeable future. Again, the purpose, the primary responsibility for this is security, and that's where we will allocate the resources. Peace officers also have the responsibility of inmate transfers, and that's primarily DACC individuals who are arrested at the jail. They are taken straight to DAC or to DACC each morning. There are many times where there might be an APD officer in the community who serves a warrant in the course of the regular business hours, and frequently those are brought to court rather than taking them to Travis County Jail to be booked in. So that would be another duty that cannot be performed by private security. If an officer drops off an individual that have brought in from the community, it would be the marshal's responsibility to take that individual before a judge. So I know that was pretty short and sweet, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Go ahead, Commissioner Lewis, please.
Thank you for the information. I have a lot of questions, but I'll definitely hear from the TDFP person too before I have some of those. But my first thought is, I'm wondering why the Reimagining Public Safety umbrella was focused on this particular issue, because I'm not hearing how it's reimagining how we think about public safety. Does that make sense?
Ray Ariano, it does make sense. And again, I think in terms of how we as a city organization looked at reimagining public safety, it was, again, how might we do things differently to include, is there another component of the city organization, another department, that could carry out these functions so that we could just dedicate law enforcement APD officers to the tasks that are particularly suited for their deployment. And so we do consider this as part of reimagining public safety, as well as what might transpire with any other organizational unit within APD that hasn't yet been considered, whether it's by the task force or by the city organization.
Commissioner Bernhardt, please.
I just have a statement. I actually also object to characterizing this as reimagine public safety. And I know it may be a city program, but I think the idea behind reimagine public safety is not using peace officers to solve problems. So just changing the title of the peace officer who's solving the problem is not reimagining anything.
Commissioner Ramirez, go ahead, and then I really want to hear from the task force, please.
And just a clarification, so would these city marshals be another type of sworn peace officer that we would have? I guess I'm trying to understand what the difference between an APD officer and a city marshal would be. You called them licensed peace officers when you spoke about them first, so if you could just explain the distinction.
So there really is no distinction. I just make the general statement, and I think it's within the state statute they're called peace officers. Certainly we call them police officers here locally and in many cities and organizations, but they would have the same certification requirements, whether for the Marshal program as they would for becoming an officer within APD. Their training would be much more focused in terms of operating certainly in a court environment and would not require all of the training that we would require of an APD law enforcement officer, APD peace officer, to operate within the APD.
And is there a number of FTEs that's being requested? I didn't see how many of these were included with regard to the program.
There were 14 FTEs that were approved in the fiscal year 22 budget.
Great. I would like to go ahead and go to Carly Jo Dixon. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Of course. Thank you all for having me here tonight. My name is Carly Jo Dixon. I'm the managing attorney at Client Services at the Texas Fair Defense Project. I would like to say that I personally am not a member of the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, although there is another attorney in my office who is. I want to just echo what some of the other commissioners have said, that this doesn't feel like reimagining public safety. It actually feels like using additional law enforcement and creating new roles for law enforcement. It seems a little disingenuous to frame it that way. I know that some members of the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force sent letter to council about this item. No one has reached out. There's been no recommendation from them on this. And so from that perspective, like I said, not as a member, but it doesn't seem like this is necessarily something that has been approved or looked at in that process. I do want to talk, I know Mary Jane Grubb said that, the intent is not to make this law enforcement that serve and execute warrants, but they are real law enforcement. My experience with city marshals in other cities is that is exactly what their job entails. They do courtroom security, and when they're not doing that, they're serving warrants. They're bringing people into court. And I really think right now, in the context of Prop B and 1925 and some of the other upheavals around law enforcement and law enforcement resources, the court needs to be building trust. We need to get people through the door, no doubt, but we need to do that in a way that really shows that there are options for people who cannot afford to pay tickets. People still don't know that. I know we're several years into law changes, but people still see the court as a place they go that they end up in jail. And I think creating a law enforcement agency whose job includes that very thing is a step backwards for the Austin Municipal Court.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. Commissioner Weber, go ahead, please.
I would just like to understand exactly where this is in the process and what is our timeline for weighing in to change what has been planned if that is what we're going to do.
So the proposed request for council action is to create the ordinance that allows for the creation of a marshal office program. Goes before council on November 18th, I think it is. 18th. From that point, then 2 weeks later, when the ordinance becomes effective, the municipal court will then be able to start the hiring process to recruit for a marshal chief or whatever that lead position is going to be called, which will then roll into that individual overseeing a program to establish the office, including whatever resources that'll be required, and hiring the ongoing, or the follow-up positions, the 13 additional positions that are in the budget.
Let's go Commissioner Lewis first.
I do just want to go back to thinking about this potential change as reimagining. I really am concerned that the city doesn't understand, at least I think, the core purpose of what, community members have wanted around, thinking about George Floyd, thinking about, the deaths of folks in our community, and wanting to look at, expanding outside of policing. And so I'm a little bit worried. I think that, I'm not sure if it was just kind of put under the umbrella for other reasons. I can't really, say what that is, but I think this is showing me that there might be a different understanding with the city about what it means to reimagine and reconsider using police to solve every problem. Because it feels separate. It feels like a separate conversation, but using the idea of reimagining, which is really confusing. So I just wanted to say that, and I think it's important to listen to what folks are experiencing that work at the city. I hear that. But I think the framing of reimagining and not having community members a part of that larger conversation, it sounds like there are folks with direct experience with city marshals that haven't, that are coming into the conversation unaware of what's been going on for a year and a half. So, A, I'm kind of worried about the city's commitment to reimagining public safety. And B, this is not reimagining, but it doesn't mean that it's not relevant in some way. It just, I think I'm a little concerned about what's behind this.
Commissioner Bernhardt, please.
So I wanted to back up a little bit and go back to the beginning of the presentation and ask does the municipal court keep any data on security incidents?
We do. We're required to report that to the Office of Court of Administration. I don't have that data with me, but I can get it.
Okay, because I'm really confused about why you provided state, if y'all have data about the Austin Municipal Courts, why you provided state trends data instead of telling us what's actually happening in the Austin courts.
I provided the state trends as an illustration of the increase across the state. But I also have Judge Statman, who's the presiding judge of Austin Municipal Court, Judge Coffey, who's the presiding judge for the community court, and Pete Valdez, a court administrator, who are here to offer additional information in terms of security incidents, if you would like to hear from them.
Well, but I'm actually not looking for anecdotal evidence. I'm sure that there have been security incidents. What I was curious about is whether or not there has been an increase in security incidents in the Austin municipal courts.
Over the last 10 years, yes, there has.
But you didn't bring the data.
I did not bring the data.
Okay. That's what I wanted to clarify. Yeah, I think it's an amazing idea. How many police are currently dedicated to the municipal courts?
Pre-pandemic, there were 13, I believe.
Okay.
And right now, we're down to about 8 because we're reduced services and hours. And those resources are over both municipal court and downtown community court.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think this is largely, I mean, it's a name change, so there's a lot of, this is largely symbolic, but I don't understand why the municipal courts need more peace officers. I think there needs to be a case made for that. And I am really concerned about any increase in criminalizing the municipal courts. Judge Crosurick was shot because a man connected to a man who she put in prison wanted to stop her from putting a guy in prison for life. The municipal courts issue tickets to people, traffic tickets. It's just not the same thing.
Understood. I'd like to make a few points of clarification. So we're not asking to increase the officers. We're just asking to replace the officers if APD removes their resources and reallocate those officers to courtroom duties rather than what they used to be allocated, or some of them used to be allocated for, which was the service of warrants. And Ms. Dixon is right. Traditionally, marshals have been used to serve warrants. That's not uncommon in Texas or really across the nation. However, again, that is subject to internal policy, so Judge Statman and myself will make those decisions, and we have committed to not using these resources for that. If that was something that's today's environment. If that's something that would change in the future, we would also commit to maybe having community engagement and getting input on those decisions. And I agree that Class C misdemeanors are certainly low-level offenses. However, they are the same individuals that are seen in higher courts. They are environments that are very emotional and volatile, and that behavior cannot always be determined or predetermined by the charge that the individual is there. They have, consequences of even Class Cs have far-reaching effects that can impact people's daily lives, and it definitely influences their behavior in ways that you might not imagine.
Well, I agree that they definitely impact people's lives in very big ways.
Thank you. I apologize, we are out of time for this, and we have 2 more things to get to. Thank you very much for your presentations and your comments. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right.